The biggest hurdle for most farmers who wish to start up is the cost of entry. Land is expensive, equipment is expensive, but there are other challenges too, right? Farmers need to be trained. Farmers need to be aware of the different practices that might help them be successful as they go forward. So there's a need for technical assistance in conservation programs and also business technical assistance. And AFT provides support of all that sort.
Welcome to Sustainability Leaders. I'm Michael Torrance, Chief Sustainability Officer at BMO. On this show, we will talk with leading sustainability practitioners from the corporate, investor, academic, and NGO communities to explore how this rapidly evolving field of sustainability is impacting global investment, business practices, and our world.
The views expressed here are those of the participants and not those of Bank of Montreal, its affiliates, or subsidiaries.
Hello, I'm Melissa Fifield, head of the BMO Climate Institute. Welcome to another episode of Sustainability Leaders. Today, we're talking about farms. Farmland isn't just where we grow food. Farms are living systems. They store carbon, secure water, support biodiversity, and underpin rural economies. I'm excited to be joined by John Piotti, CEO of American Farmland Trust, to talk about the bridge between capital and the people stewarding the land. We'll explore blended finance models and outcome-based mechanisms that help connect public and private capital to regenerative practices. Practices like cover crops, reduced tillage, diversified rotations, agrivoltaics, all things that help deliver measurable climate benefits, and how the adoption of these techniques can accelerate climate resilience across North American food systems. John has spent more than 3 decades at the forefront of sustainable agriculture and farmland protection, first as a legislator in the state of Maine, leading the Agriculture Committee, as the president of Maine Farmland Trust, helping more than 400 farms remain viable and permanently protecting more than 35,000 acres. And now as the CEO of American Farmland Trust, where he led the most comprehensive study of U.S. land use, securing billions in federal funding for farmland protection and climate-smart agriculture, and launching programs that advance regenerative practices and support next-generation farmers. While today's examples come from the U.S., these issues, farmland protection, regenerative practices, and climate-smart finance, are just as relevant in Canada and globally. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be here.
For those in our audience who may not be familiar, could you take a couple minutes and introduce American Farmland Trust and share with us what your core mission is?
Sure. American Farmland Trust is a unique organization. We were founded in 1980, and we were really the first organization that looked at agriculture and environmental issues as two sides of the same coin. If you go back to the 1970s in the United States, that was a period where the farm community and the environmental community were really at odds. Farmers were frequently viewed as polluters, but forward-looking people who recognized that farmers need to rely on clean resources and are good stewards of the land, and with the right opportunities before them, they can really be environmental champions. And American Farmland Trust was founded to advance that direction, which today sounds pretty commonplace, but really was a bit of a new idea back 45, 46 years ago. And AFT benefited from the fact not only to have some visionary founders, but our early staff included really the man who held the banner highest on soil conservation. He had served as the head of the Soil Conservation Service under President Jimmy Carter, and that really allowed us to almost immediately have a big impact. Our mission is to save the land that sustains us, our farmland, through 3 vehicles: through protecting that land, through permanent agricultural conservation easements where possible, to promoting sound farming practices, and most importantly, to keep new farmers on the land, to help make it possible for existing farmers to stay in business and to attract the next generation. And that kind of holistic view is now embraced by a lot of groups, but it really was a new thing back then.
Thanks for sharing that bit of history. I love the linking together of the common interests of farmers and conservationists. That's a unique genesis for this organization. You've said that farmland is essential climate infrastructure, and I'd love for you to unpack that idea a bit. What functions do you see it performing, and how does that framing influence investment and policy?
Well, farmland is so essential in so many ways. Obviously, you can't farm without farmland. So if we're just thinking about food production, the land is critically important. But farmland, well managed, provides a host of really critical environmental services. So the ones that are perhaps most easily recognized might be, say, biodiversity and wildlife habitat, because you can see it, open space and scenic beauty, which is more than just a nice amenity. It often is what might drive tourism or the vibrancy of a community because people want to live there. But increasingly, as we build soil health through better practices, people have recognized the power of farmland to sequester carbon. Now, we obviously are facing a huge crisis with climate change. What a lot of people don't know is that of all the carbon that's in our atmosphere, approximately a third of it is not the result of a burning of fossil fuels, but has been released from the soil, most of it over the last 150 years since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. And that is carbon that through the best practices can be returned to the soil. So that's critically important. It's one of the few hopeful signs out there as we think about addressing the climate crisis. So you can go down a long list of incredible value that farmland provides to us. Obviously, our food, all of these critical environmental services, water recharge, biodiversity, carbon sequestration. And then beyond that, if you think about what the farms themselves provide, farms are frequently the key economic and cultural force in our rural communities, keep our communities thriving and alive.
That's fantastic. Maybe practically speaking, can you explain a bit how does American Farmland Trust do its work, connect the resources to the farmers in order to achieve your objectives? What kinds of services, tools, program structures are helping connect those dots?
Well, we do a number of things. There's really two principal ways we interact directly with farmers. We either help them think about and then implement ways of protecting their land. And when I say that, I mean placing agricultural conservation easements on their land that will allow for a range of farm activities, but will prevent the removal of topsoil and prevent non-agricultural development. That's one area. And the second principal way we interact with farmers is we provide support and services so they can implement better practices, sound practices, many of which are designed to enhance soil health. So regenerative practices, climate smart practices. Thanks to a great extent to American Farmland Trust, there is now a robust program at the United States Department of Agriculture that compensates farmers for placing easements on their property. And there are also in 27 states, again, thanks to American Farmland Trust, this was a huge focus for us in the 1980s and 90s. And there are now 27 states that have programs that compensate farmers for putting easements on their land. Farmers frequently pay down some of their debt to the bank if they're borrowing funds on their land, and that's going to reduce their operating costs. And then they frequently use that money to invest in maybe it's new equipment or some infrastructure improvement on their property. So one way that AFT directly helps bring capital to farmers is we have now helped hundreds of thousands of farms across this country over the last 46 years. It's up to 8 million acres of farmland. We've helped those farms secure financial support through this instrument of agricultural conservation easements. The second thing we do, as I mentioned earlier, is we help farmers with new farming practices. I shouldn't say new farming practices. Actually, many of them are quite old-fashioned, but we help farmers pursue regenerative practices, climate smart practices that are helping them build soil health, which over time will make their farms more productive and resilient.
Well, and it sounds like you're putting into place the things that will help those practices scale. And 8 million acres is a pretty impressive feat already. Really incredible work that you all are doing. I want to dig into one area that I know AFT has taken a leadership role in, which is related to agrivoltaics, really training farmers, advancing research on soil health under those solar arrays. Can you help our audience understand, maybe briefly describe what agrivoltaics are for those who may not be familiar? And second, what have you learned about designing those kinds of projects that deliver both climate outcomes and farm viability?
So agrivoltaics is this notion that you can have solar arrays on farmland in a way that does not reduce the agricultural productivity of that land. And in an ideal world, voltaics is synergistic. It might be as simple as elevating your solar panels so that livestock can get underneath those for shade. But there are also a number of crops that work well in partial shade and actually benefit from that. This is an area that is relatively new in the United States, but in Germany and some other parts of the world, they've really been testing this and tweaking out what works over the last decade or so. And AFT is really on the cutting edge of advancing some voltaic projects.
That's great. And I think one other benefit we've seen here in California is just the heat factor, also protecting some crops from the heat from the sun, but giving them the sunlight that they need, but protecting them from the temperature. So lots of benefits there. I want to pivot a bit to talk about a program, Farmers Powering Communities. I'm curious to hear more about the project selection and the capital stack associated with that project, and what plans may be to expand beyond. I think that program's in New York and Illinois currently. What makes those projects attractive to lenders or corporate buyers?
Well, Farmers Powering Communities is an example of not only being supportive of the notion of smart solar, but working with a progressive solar developer to make it happen on the ground. So we partner with some companies that really want to do solar right. And that means helping find the right properties, helping the farmers who own that land explore how their site might be best suited for limited solar development in some way, and helping the companies really understand the needs of the farmer and the farmland. And as I said before, this concept of smart solar is there's a place, a critical need actually for solar development on farms to serve our energy needs, as well as income diversification strategy for the farmers. But this is an example of, rather than just offering ideas on how to do smart solar, having principles on our website, engaging in state policy to make sure that public utility commissions are recognizing the value of agrivoltaics. Those things we do, and they're all important. But it's also important for us to really get our hands dirty and be working directly with farmers and some progressive solar developers to make these things happen. And it is limited now. You have to start somewhere. But we're very excited about doing this more and more. We're working with a handful of different solar companies now. We'd love to work with more.
That's great. You talked a bit about the work that you all do to document practices and the impact that they're having, the outcomes, and programs that are paying for those verified outcomes, like carbon sequestration, water quality improvements, are really gaining traction. But it's all based upon really solid measurement, reporting, and verification to document what those benefits are and demonstrate the returns on the investments. What kind of monitoring or measurement, rather, reporting or verification standards and data practices are you seeing that are really helping to confidently underwrite those outcomes?
Well, you've identified an area that is both changing fast and that is critically needed. So let's take a step back for a moment. We know, and you've pointed out, that these practices can really have some great environmental benefits. And if farmers are providing a societal benefit like this, one way of ensuring the viability of farmers, making sure they're going to be around to continue to provide these great benefits, is if we can monetize those benefits in some manner and have them receive some funding for it. I mean, right now, farmers only provide a whole range of benefits, but really only get compensated for the food or feed that they grow. And sometimes that's not necessarily a fair price. So if we can do anything to quantify those benefits that will allow for additional funding to flow to farmers, wouldn't that be great? Having said that, it's complicated. We know all these things have benefits, but the concept of quantification of those benefits is very, very difficult. You can do it. There's technology that allows you to do it, but it's cumbersome and it's expensive, right? So we are moving more and more in a direction of sensors and other things that are allowing us to do this easier and more cheaply, but we're not there yet. So in my mind, what you really need at this point in time is to recognize the value of these practices that have benefits, even when you can't quantify them. And that is a perfect place for public policy, right? We should be providing support to farmers to do things which we know have public benefit, but are not easy to quantify, and thus there isn't a clear market solution. And then there's another category of things where you can quantify them. Carbon is an example of that. You can quantify carbon that's being sequestered. Is it easy? Well, it's easier now than it was 10 years ago. It's still a little cumbersome. It's still a little expensive. But for a farm of certain size, following certain practices, that's possible. And that creates some opportunities for, say, carbon markets. But if you think of this as these two different pockets, if you will, what we know does good that makes sense for, say, the programs in the conservation title of the Farm Bill to be supporting because it's bringing benefits. Let government support do that. Let market forces help support those things that are more easily quantifiable. And that needle is moving. More and more, we're being able to quantify in an efficient, cost-effective way. And so I can see a morphing of going from more support and programs that are government-based to more things that are driven by different market opportunities, carbon credits and the like. But we're not there yet. This is, many of us hope, will be a revolution in how farmers are ultimately supported for the important environmental benefits that they bring.
John, from your vantage point, which regenerative practices are most consistently improving net farm income and resilience? And what financial instruments have you seen that best support that adoption?
There are a number of different regenerative climate smart practices. I think the Natural Resource Conservation Service of USDA recognizes over 40 of them. The ones that are often most cited because they're probably the most widespread include cover crops, reduced tillage, so not turning over the land with a plow so much that reduces a lot of carbon, crop rotations, and there are many others. But Those are some of the major ones. And they definitely have both environmental and over time financial benefits. The problem is that you have to do them for a period of time before you realize those benefits, and they cost money up front. Public policy can play a critical role here. Cover crops is a great example. We've been pushing cover crops as an organization for 40 years. And yet, if you look at the numbers across the nation, depending on how you look at them, but it's somewhere between maybe 6 and 10% of the farmland that could have cover crops on it is being utilized that way. That seems really low. It's growing, and that's great, but why is it so low? Well, part of it is the benefits come up long term, and the costs are right front and center. And then you layer on top of that the fact that we have a very old farmer population. It's about getting new farmers on the land because young farmers want to follow these practices and are ready to embrace them. But that's its own set of challenges.
How's American Farmland Trust ensuring that those beginning farmers and those who may have been historically underserved can access land, the technical assistance they may need, and the financing so that they get the support that they need to be that next generation farmer?
This is a critical area. There's probably nothing more important, obviously, perhaps, to the future of farming than making sure we can attract the next generation. And there are a number of things that are important if we're going to be successful. But the biggest hurdle for most farmers who wish to start up is the cost of entry. Land is expensive, equipment is expensive, but there are other challenges too, right? Farmers need to be trained. Farmers need to be aware of the different practices that might help them be successful as they go forward. So there's a need for technical assistance in conservation programs and also business technical assistance to help them understand enterprise accounting and budgeting and preparing business plans so they can go to the bank and get a loan. And AFT provides support of all that sort. We're a small organization. We can't do that on hundreds of thousands of farmers, but last year, I think we provided direct services to close to 30,000 farmers and ranches. So it does make a difference. So those are really some of the key tools that are needed. And you really need to provide this full range of services if we're going to attract the number of farmers who we need in the future. By our estimates, by American Farmland Trust research, we're going to have roughly 1/3 of American farmland, over 300 million acres, exchange hands in the next 15 years, due simply to demographic factors, the age of the farmland owner. That is a huge opportunity to get new farmers on the land and to really move the needle on regenerative practices. Because as I said before, these new farmers want to follow those practices and they're open to following those practices. This is a huge opportunity. It's also a huge challenge, right? Because we need to provide the support and services to help all that land transition in the right way.
That's great. And maybe to bring it all home here, if you could make one ask of the financial sector, one of producers in the next 12 months, what would they be to help unlock a step change in scaling farmland as climate infrastructure, as you have said?
Well, the vast majority of capital that flows to farmers to help them be successful is coming from banks and other financial institutions. And to the extent that those banks and financial institutions are willing to work with AFT, we would love to partner more on helping the farmers you are working with thinking about the right practices, because long term, those are going to protect the bank's investments. It's going to be a more resilient farm. There's going to be potential environmental market opportunities that will open up in the future. So let's put in place right now regenerative management plans or other things to get those farms on the right track that is going to ensure greater resilience and financial success. We are not working right now with many financial institutions around that. I think we could be a great partner and asset. Let's think upfront with your clients how we can support them. And that's going to take some upfront money, to be honest, if we're providing services and the like. But long term, it can be better for the banks, better for the farmers, and better for our planet.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your insights with us today, John. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you for doing this, and I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Sustainability Leaders. This podcast is presented by BMO. You can find our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. Press the follow button if you want to get notified when new episodes are published. We value your input, so please leave a rating, review, and any feedback that you might have, or visit us at bmo.com/sustainability leaders. Our show and resources are produced with support from BMO's marketing team and Puddle Creative. Until next time, thanks for listening and have a great week.
For BMO disclosures, please visit bmocm.com/podcast/disclaimer.